Welcome back to part 3 of the Star Wars Connection podcast, featuring our discussion of the artistic works selected by Lucasfilm for Star Wars Celebration. For parts 1 or 2, please click on the links below. And we still need to get to the sexy controversy part of this podcast. And when I say sexy controversy, I mean it, because I have actually nicknamed, personally, this is what I call it in my mind, the next Lucasfilm selection, Kylo and Rey, Sex, Ecstasy, and Rock and Roll. It's actually really called Rey's Abduction by artist Erik Maell. And why don't you start off on this, Felix?
Yeah, okay. So, to begin with, every time that I watch this particular scene in the movie, I really get a good chuckle out of, so you've got Kylo Ren, carrying Rey across the threshold of his ship, and then the stormtroopers have been standing watch at the base of the ship, and then they kind of come in and follow behind him. I get a laugh out of it because, in all of my watch standing days, I just kind of remember, I think of myself in their position, and I'm like, there's no way that wouldn't look weird. I mean, it does. And, so I get it. I get that, this is a Space Wizards movie, and Kylo Ren is kind of already really extravagant and over the top. He's got his death costuming, and then he's got his big red masculine symbol, saber. But even so, I imagine that, one trooper had to have looked at the other and was like, dude, did you see that? Do you see Mission Commander thinking with his pants right now? And to me, this is the exact vibe that the artwork captures. So the artist, Erik Maell, made the statement that he was actually going for this, Universal Monsters vibe. So if you think of Dracula, like we saw in the earlier painting, think of Frankenstein, think of, the Swamp Thing. And while he was not consciously thinking of Gone with the Wind or with romance novel covers, he could see how those references worked too. So if we look at the art objectively, what we have is a dramatic background at Kylo Ren's command shuttle, with the ramp enveloped in steam and light shining down like they're on this rock and roll stage. And then front and center is Kylo in this exaggerated masculine stance. So when I say exaggerated masculine stance, okay, even in the military, parade rest is kind of a masculinized stance, and you have the feet at shoulder width or just slightly wider apart. But Kylo's feet are positioned well beyond that, and he's taking up as much space as possible, which signals dominance.
Exactly. And that's why I think of the words rock and roll when I see this picture. Seriously, with the bright lights and the drama and that little tiny reminder of heavy metal animation, it's like I am looking at an album cover from an 80s rock band. It's like John Bon Jovi commanding the stage. It's like, Tommy and Gina from Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer, but it's Tommy and Gina. Rey and Kylo are Tommy and Gina after he got his 6-string out of Hock. And now they are cosplaying, and Tommy is being the hero in some grand rock star adventure.
Well, I mean, Kylo could definitely fit with the 80s hair bands.
Yes!
Kylo has Rey, and she's passed out, and she's held in a position in which their hips, so their groin regions, are level with one another, so take from that what you will, and then her chest is raised toward his masked face, her head is thrown back, and if you close in on her face, she looks like she's not merely passed out, but she looks like a woman in the throes of ecstasy, which is probably what's reminding some people of the cheesy romance novel covers. So, speaking of, romance, let's go to epic romance in film and in literature. If you flip the classic Gone with the Wind movie poster and put a little bit of space between Rhett and Scarlet, it's almost the exact same image as Maell's work. Scarlet has fainted, Rhett's looking down at her exposed neck, she's in the throes of passion, and then even if you take a look at the Empire Strikes Back poster, we've got a similar thing with Han and Leia. So, which, make no mistake about it, that poster probably also a callback to Gone with the Wind. Because, you've got the guy peering down at the girl and, she's in that lower level position and gazing up at him and head thrown back. But getting back to the universal monsters, which is what the artist cites his work as directly influenced by, in monster movies, the monster, who is almost always portrayed as tragic and sympathetic, has unrequited feelings for the maiden, and somehow, in its crazy monster head, thinks that after he kidnaps her, she will return those feelings. I think this is the intention we're seeing in Maell's work, where Kylo is in his masked monster form, asserting his masculinity, asserting his dominance, and then peering down at Rey's exposed neck. So, now apparently there are some people who've taken issue with this art. It actually stirred up quite a bit of controversy. They were saying that Rey is inappropriately sexualized in the painting, and I have referenced that her chest is raised and her face looks reminiscent of a romance novel heroine in the throes of passion. But something I want to really point out here, I think it's important, about her presentation. So, we've had pictures of the cheesy romance novel covers up. We've had pictures of like Gone with the Wind. Notice a difference between Rey and those heroines, even in the monster movies. So Rey is, she's fully clothed, as she is in the movie. Her chest is not exposed. I mean, it's lifted up, but it's not exposed. They're not about to fall out. And her breasts are true to their small size, all of which are often not the case when we're dealing with artistic representations of female characters. And I think that in and of itself is very respectful of the character.
Felix, Isa, you both said some excellent things on this regarding this painting, but I'm going to digress a little bit. When I looked at the picture, there's a strange thought that came to my head. We have almost, it's almost been 100 years, but even now, back then and even now, when you have a male protagonist in a film who is dark, who's brooding, who's intense, and not afraid to show their emotions, thus these characters have a big polarizing effect on the general audience. Most women love them, and men either hate them or they want to be them. And even, I think, 100 years from now, if you look, I'm sure whatever medium we have, it'll be the same story. Now, why I mention this is because this particular picture reminded me of an old 1921 movie, The Sheikh, with Rudolph Valentino. And even in its 1926 sequel, there were famous bridal carry scenes. And in both the movies, the female protagonist begins by hating the main hero of the story. And they have good reason, because he's pretty obnoxious at that time. But the one thing that I noted there, and I feel will happen even in this particular trilogy, is that the male protagonist evolves with the story, and he redeems himself in both those stories. So initially, when the bridal carry scene happens, the women struggle, fight, curse, even say they hate the guy. But at the end of it, they are totally madly in love with the guy. So I'm not going in that far necessarily in Star Wars, but that happened in those movies. And speaking of the bridal carry, when Kylo is carrying Rey to the entrance of the ship, isn't he technically carrying her across a threshold? Like a bride?
Yeah, okay, so for me, that carrying across the threshold is actually what sells this interaction as more than platonic and decidedly not familial. So context matters, of course. So when Chewie carries an injured Finn onto the Falcon, I really don't think most of us assume there's any funny business going on. But when a quote-unquote creature in a mask, who turns out to be a handsome young man, carries an uninjured young woman across the threshold, it connotes something very specific. In Western culture, it's traditional for a groom to carry his bride over the threshold of their new home, and of course, we're all adults here, we all know what happens after that. So when he's carrying her in the monster or the bridal style, that might cause a few pings on the radar. But when he carries her across the threshold, that's when the alarm bell should go off, because it means a very particular thing. It means that Kylo Ren, whether it's at a conscious or a subconscious level, is sexually interested in Rey. And that's a strong indicator of where this story could be headed.
Y'all mentioned, speaking of where the story is headed, monster movies, all these things, while this may be called a monster, this may have been inspired by old monster movies, complete with the foggy background and everything. Most of the monsters in these movies look straight ahead and they carry this unconscious girl back to their lair. In case, Kylo is looking at his face while looking at her face while he's carrying her. So she obviously is not just some random female he saw somewhere and picked up and is carrying back with some evil purpose. He cares for her in some way. It's obvious. I'll just mention on a related note, these characters. We always talk that the hero of a story carries the girl. Some dashing fellow or a monster carries the girl. But, sometimes there are unconventional characters who are heroes and maybe carrying an unconscious girl and these people maybe would not qualify for scary, evil, or even, let's say, charming guy in a suit. If you look at old Tarzan movies, we see him carrying an unconscious Jane in the jungle, but nobody says, oh my God, how terrible.
Exactly. And actually, that is an excellent point about him looking at her as opposed to just looking forward. Because, you think of those, like when you get really monster, like Nosferatu. He is just like looking forward like a zombie. Forward indicates having a possession. She is mine. Looking at her actually acknowledges her as a person. He's admiring her. And obviously that admiration could range from sexual desire to him thinking she's a goddess in his arms. But whatever it is, he appreciates her somehow. And though he is abducting her, strangely enough, he's actually holding her in a very respectful manner. And this scene in the movie that's portrayed here is actually was very interesting to me, because he actually makes himself extremely vulnerable by choosing to hold her. But still he does it. He walks through a battlefield without access to his weapon. He doesn't hand her over to the stormtroopers like he does Poe. He doesn't even float her with the Force. He doesn't even seem to leave her side, as we find him next crouching in a very submissive position. And this is what Felix was referring to earlier, this composition and shot of the beginning of the interrogation scene, where it's this Jungian shot where he's in shadow and he's kneeling before her and she's, bathed in light. And in a way, you could also look at that position in another way. He's crouching in front of her, and it's almost like a submissive position. And there's something about it to me that is reminiscent of, knights and noblewomen imagery. And, obviously there are definitely some serious Hades and Persephone imagery things happening here, because it's an abduction. There's no question about that. But what's fascinating, as even in those stories, in those mythological stories, Hades oftentimes really did love Persephone. And she actually, in turn, found an empowering place in his world where he could be quite submissive to her.
Persephone is a strange deity, because on one hand, she's the queen of the world, the soul, so therefore the wisdom and darkness that goes with those two areas, of the underworld and mystic knowledge. While in addition to this, she's the goddess of spring, hope, all the light, cute stuff. So she's walking in two worlds. She's got one foot in each world. And the thing is, Hades obviously in all stories loves her, because we have stories where obviously the rules of the underworld are very strict. To be dead, it's a and you don't go back. But when Persephone says that she wants to help someone, Hades has always backed off and let her do as she pleases. I mean, there's an instance in in the story of Cupid and Psyche where she intervened and helped Psyche, though, she did not have to. So, and Hades didn't say a word. I mean, he just backed off and let her do precisely what she wanted.
Yeah, that's pretty usual of Hades to do. So there are many versions of the Hades and Persephone myth. So it began in Greece, and then it was retold by the Romans. And the Greeks refer to her as Proserpina. So Persephone is actually her Roman name. But in Greece, she was so feared that they didn't even speak her name. And in some iterations of the myth, Persephone is actually Hades' willing queen and is considered the more fearsome of the pair. In other versions, which is more salient to this presentation we have of Reya and Kylo, Hades falls in love with this young maiden, and so while she's alone in a meadow, he causes the ground to split open, and immediately, I say the ground splits open, and it reminds me of when the ground splits open between Rey and Kylo Ren after their lightsaber duel. But then Hades abducts her and spirits her away to the underworld in his chariot, which is led by 4 black horses. And then here I'm immediately reminded of Kylo Ren's command shuttle, and as it's flying away after the abduction, it's heralded by 4 TIE fighters. And then once Hades gets Persephone to the underworld, they're married. She is not initially into this. She does not like it. And I think we all know that Rey doesn't quite like being where she's at. But over time, Persephone comes to love her husband. She rules by his side as the mature queen of the underworld. So here we have yet another myth about growing from immature girlhood or innocence to mature sexuality, womanhood, and power. And that kind of relates back to that heroine's journey from the last podcast. So yes, in some versions, Persephone is indeed more fearsome or more feared than Hades. She's certainly not someone to be trifled with. There's actually another myth called Persephone and Aphrodite. And so long story short here, the 2 goddesses are fighting over the beautiful mortal youth Adonis. And, in some iterations, he's actually a baby, just this beautiful baby that these 2 women are fighting over. But in other iterations, he is a full-grown, beautiful man that these 2 women are fighting over. And they're fighting over who gets to keep him. And in some versions, before Zeus gets involved, Persephone first appeals to her husband Hades to help settle the matter. And his reaction, he's basically like, no, I'm staying out of this one, And, all right, hear me out on this, but if your wife comes to you because she's fighting with another woman over keeping a young man she has a crush on in your house, and your top concern is staying the hell out of the way, that tells you something about the dynamic of that marriage.
Yes. Because that is so fascinating to me. I knew enough of the myth to know that Persephone was definitely someone to be reckoned with. But I never knew that she had a reputation so fearsome that people were afraid to speak her name. Or, and this is crazy, he's supposed to be the king of the underworld. Her husband is so deferential to her that he's actually just going to be okay with her keeping, in the young man Adonis version, some boy toy in the house just because he can't deal with the heat from her if she says no.
Oh yeah, I mean, if they keep going with this Hades and Persephone theme, I'm going to say Kylo's not wearing the pants in that relationship.
Yeah, and actually in a less sexualized, no pants scenario, this kind of ties back into this sort of courtly love thing that I kind of get from the picture of, because he's in this heroic stance, and even though he's abducting her, he's respectful, and so this is the way I see Kylo. I see him being portrayed in a very Western European medieval way. From the way he dresses like a Knights Templar, to how he acts like a fearless soldier on the battlefield, to the old-fashioned shape of the sword. I mean, he's literally called a Knight of Ren, and Ren actually translates to compassion. So I actually got something of the sense of, I don't know, this isn't the right word, but like submissive knight here. Like, she is this noble creature he must rescue because his stance is heroic. He is made really not to look like a monster, even though he's masked like that, you know, with the John Bon Jovi stance. He's a strong, healthy, young, fit man. He is just a masked knight here. And she is like some grand lady or goddess that he must revere.
You know, I wouldn't personally call his stance in this particular art submissive. I would call attention back to its masculinity, which does connote a protective quality. So here again, our attention is called to the special treatment Kylo gives to Rey as opposed to, say, Poe or, okay, really any other character in the film. So rather than have those hapless troopers, again, put her on board the trooper shuttle, like he did with Poe, this guy's gone out of his way to carry her across the battlefield to his own personal command shuttle himself, ensuring that she comes to no physical harm. So his stance in the art, I think you're right. I think it is of a heroic quality. And although we as the audience know that Kylo is the villain of the film, you have to look at it through the character's perspective. And I imagine that because, you know, he's doing this because he thinks he's right. So I'm sure he sees himself as the hero who is saving this poor mixed-up young woman from the clutches of the murderers, traitors, and thieves of the notorious Resistance.
Yes, and I agree with you completely. And protective. That's the word I'm looking for. I like that word better, because those medieval knights swore loyalty and protection to those ladies. And I definitely think he sees himself in that guise here, no matter how misguided he is. Because it has been repeated again and again through various interviews that Kylo really does think he is on the right side of history here. And I am very interested to find out why he thinks that. But regardless, once again, this art, chosen by a panel at Lucasfilm, hints at a deepening relationship between Rey and Kylo. That they may not be enemies forever. Instead, they are two rarely gifted people on a parallel journey. And that they may eventually join together on that journey.
Mm-hmm. You know, Kylo struggle. When we saw him in The Force Awakens, he's been struggling to push out the light and remain in the dark. And in contrast to him, there's Rey, who's struggling to stay in the light and push away the dark. I mean, they're both on two opposite sides, trying to do two opposite things. I mean, and the reason why I say that she's struggling to stay in the light and push away the dark is because the dark came so easily to her. She almost killed Kylo on Starkiller Base. It was, I mean, she had that thought in her mind. I mean, even if a voice spoke to her, she almost did it. And Kylo, we know that he's drawn to Rey, and the paintings also, maybe they were selected because that is the direction they're going in, that Kylo is drawn to Rey. And but I feel that Rey is still at a stage in where she's trying to understand her place in the galaxy, trying to understand her force powers. She's still in a kind of she's still in the stage where she has to find herself before she looks at anybody else. But there is obviously a bond between the two of them. There is a shared destiny, most definitely. And those light orbs that appear in their respective heart areas, and those lightsabers, the lightsaber that appears over Rey's heart, I think these are all hints that these two are going to at the very least be allies. But I would say it would even go as far as a very deep romance at some point in the future. I mean, there's something that's going to happen. We just don't know what as yet.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, it's really even difficult for me to separate the characters enough to talk about individual journeys because they're presented in the film as two sides of the same coin. So in both characters, we see varying levels of the same primary traits. You've got compassion, rage, loneliness, isolation, desperation. They've got equal talent and power in the Force. And gosh, even their costuming is designed to mirror each other's. If you look at the sleeves of, if you look at both of their sleeves, they've got this kind of the same stripy thing going on. So I tend to think of this heroine and villain pairing as kind of a matched set. At the very least, their dynamic is going to be the most important, and their arcs the most closely intertwined within the next two films. The selected art, I feel, highlights their importance as the central and defining relationship within the sequel trilogy.
I couldn't agree with both of you more. These two are on a parallel journey. They are both capable of darkness and light, and both are probably equally powerful in the Force. They are also both passionate and aggressive and lonely. These two are the two that the Force seems to be playing chess with. The two figures, the light and the dark, that I think maybe, just maybe, might bring balance to the Force. But think about it. Think about images that Lucasfilm could have promoted here instead of these images. Where is the Kylo gets eviler and eviler image where he gets red eyes and goes all Anakin? Because you know someone submitted that one. On the other side, where is Rey kicking Kylo's ass, the blue of the light, leaving the red in the dust in humiliating defeat? I mean, they just would have needed someone to recreate him all slashed on the ground for that one. And I bet someone submitted that visual. And on the whole, Kylo has to win in Episode 8 argument. Where is the picture of Kylo getting aggressive and just slamming his lightsaber down on Rey? And what about the nostalgia angle? Where's the picture of Kylo standing on those Irish cliffs, recalling Empire Strikes Back, arms outstretched Vader style, while Rey hangs by her fingernails Luke style with the title, "Join me, and together we can overthrow Snoke and rule the galaxy as Emperor and Empress." Sure, Lucasfilm had that great cliffside picture, which actually has its own set of romantic and or sexual undertones depending on who you ask, but if all Kylo and Rey were and are going to be is the bitterest of enemies, wouldn't they just push this fighting angle? Wouldn't they just reimagine it in their promotional art? Why would Lucasfilm even bother with all of this emotional stuff if all Kylo and Rey are ever going to be as enemies? And you got to ask that question because we didn't get that enemy portrayal here. What did we get? We got called to the light, a goddess pulling him out of the darkness in tumultuous, emotion-laden, romantic style. We got the parallel stances of Kylo and Rey, indicating a parallel journey that they are two sides of the same coin in the Force Awakens poster and in the comic, with the orb of light at their hearts and Kylo's light breaking free. We got Rey discovering the Force and reaching enlightenment, yet somehow Kylo is a huge part of that, while Luke is relegated to the small corner. It makes you wonder who will be her most influential teacher after all. And finally, the sexy Gone with the Wind Empire Strikes Back copy that makes Kylo look like a heroic rock star knight and Rey as the beautiful please goddess he reveres and carries. I mean, seriously, you don't have to put these pictures out there if your plan is to mango Kylo into evilness, cubed, and have Adam Driver cackling like the Emperor. These pictures are collector's items. They are going to have to make some sense down the road. Something is happening with these pictures. They are telling us something. I am convinced of it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. And I mean, it's not surprising to me because I think that redemption and some sort of bond between Rey and Kylo is exactly what we were presented in The Force Awakens in the first place. So this art just kind of keeps with that theme to me.
Exactly.
And I also think that, what you said is very important, that these pictures are going to become collector's items. They're going to make sense sometime later. Because every year Star Wars celebrations, there is artwork. And people remember the previous years, the artwork of the previous years are still in circulation. And they get rare, they may be rare collector's items, but people I mean, if you do a Google search, you'll find them. So if they're going to give some, I mean, that message will have to be clear. I mean, what message, the direction they're going in has to be clear now. So, I mean, it is, so obviously it's not just some silly pictures that were put together. There is a plan, obviously a plan going on. I mean, they have to make sense.
Exactly. And if anybody knows how to handle messaging, it is Disney and their, subsidiary Lucasfilm. These people wrote the book on it. So there is definitely something going on with these pictures. And this has been a fabulous discussion. I am going to have to learn all kinds of new things from both of you, and I hope the audience has learned many new things and would like to explore things in terms of chakras and paintings of William Blake and the Romantic movement, because when we started this project, I thought it was going to be easy and it was going to be simple. And as we got more and more into these pictures, there was just so much more there. There's so much embedded in them. So it's been very exciting and a pleasure to work with both of you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure being on.
Thanks. It's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful discussion.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think that is going to be it for us today. We would like to thank all of our contributors and, of course, our viewers. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of our upcoming podcasts, and you can follow us on Twitter. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can leave a comment for us or ask us questions in the comment section. Or you can email us at starwarsconnection09@gmail.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you.